a set of rules or a set of limitations, whether they're physical, sometimes they're social, they're cultural, sometimes they're mental. There is a box of limits that keeps you from being who you could possibly be or achieving everything that you could possibly achieve. I asked myself what my box was. Is it the fact that I'm a woman in a business that's full of men with loud voices? Is it the fact that I'm younger than a lot of people in this business? Is it the fact that I'm not a political journalist? I have no background in politics whatsoever. I don't know any politicians. They don't know me. Hopefully they'll find out after some time. They don't know me now. I realized that my box is very simply the television. The box that I remember, we were taught in school that the TV is an idiot box. It was called the idiot box. My parents would always yell at us saying, don't watch so much TV, go out and play. The idiot box was called the idiot box back then because it made people stupid from watching it such a lot, and because it didn't listen. Because it was only one-way communication, right? It was all coming out one side, it was not listening on the other side. Of course, now it's an idiot box for a completely different set of reasons. Because even inside the box, they're not listening to each other now. Forget about listening to the audiences. So I realized that for me and for Mira now, the box was the TV itself. And it was not about thinking outside the box, because then we wouldn't have jobs. It was about thinking beyond the box. How do you think beyond the box? So here we were trying to put together a channel where a bunch of kids, we had in our box certain sides of challenges, right? So the first challenge was the fact that fundamentally the box doesn't listen. It doesn't listen to its audience. Television doesn't allow that. Second side of it is it's a cluttered market. India doesn't need or didn't need at that point. I was asked the question, why do we need one more national channel? I said, we don't need one more national channel. We need one channel that does news. We don't need one more channel that does news, because right now nobody was actually, in my opinion, doing news. The other side of the clutter was that we were a team of young people, very young. My team is actually very, very young. You could look at it on either side, either glass half full, half empty. We're either very young or very inexperienced, however you want to look at it. We had no legacy names. There were no big, famous, celebrity journalists on our team. We were all very young people. And these were all challenges that we were going to have to beat. The other challenge that I saw was the fact that television, even though it is in everybody's houses right now, has very limited reach. Because I can put something out on TV, it will go out once, maybe twice. Now, if you weren't at home at that time and you didn't see it, it won't reach you. You'll never see it. So the video that I played, for example, of that child lock information, how many of you saw it? How many of you saw it on TV, and how many of you saw it on your phones? Almost everybody saw it on their phones. So that was a way to think outside of the boxes that we were in. So the box that we were in, of the fact that we were, to begin with, a young channel with no budgets, we used the internet to listen to our audiences. We used the internet to find out what's affecting people. What do people care about? Do they really care about some random, story about hate, about how communities should need to hate each other, about how we should hate Pakistan all the time? Or do people actually care about what is really happening in their lives? Do people actually care about safety? Do they actually care about school safety? Do they actually care about the price of fuel? Do you actually care about what GST is doing to your lives? Is this what people really care about? Is this what they're actually talking about? So we started to use the internet to listen. The second more obvious thing that we did was, inside the box also we listened to each other. And we told all of the people who come on the channel not to shout at each other and to actually listen to each other. And we realized that that added value, because people who did come to the channel to watch us could understand what was being said. And that was a lot more fun than being yelled at. We hired our young team because our young team was able to then mirror our audience and literally come in and tell us every day that, "Acha, listen, my friend was saying this, कि उसके साथ ये हुआ था, उसके साथ वो हुआ था." So we started to pay attention to what people actually wanted. In my opinion, it was our job to do two things. One was inform, and the other one was create an impact and action some sort of change. So a great example, and the reason why I played that child lock video for you is because there were two aims with that whole campaign. We started that campaign because over 3 years ago, there was a young lady in Infosys in Pune, or one of the IT companies in Pune, who was leaving after work to go home. And the taxi that she took, the taxi driver child locked her into that taxi. She was not aware of that at that point, that there was such a thing as child lock. They kidnapped her, and her body was discovered a couple of days later. Her husband was on the show when those murderers were given a death sentence. He came onto the show, he spoke to us. He said, "If it was not for child lock, my wife would be with me today." And that sentence really hit me. And I said, we have two jobs here. One is to inform as many people as we can that there is such a thing as child lock, and you could get stuck in it, given the fact that even after that, after 3 years ago, there are so many of us who take cabs by ourselves every day. We're taking these aggregator taxis every day. You jump in it, you jump out of it. You never check if the child lock is on. So one job for me, I realized, was to inform as many people as possible. The second job was to try and get regulation and government to pass some sort of rule that will either prevent taxis from having a child lock at all, or put a sticker on the cab that says, "Check this car before you get into it." Now, in order to do these two things, we need to use both the box and what is outside the box. Because action and influence will only happen through television. You can only reach the highest portions of our society, the people who run our governments, through television, and we did that. We managed to speak with the Ministry of Surface Transport. We managed to try and get them to consider removing child lock from taxis in their next policy that is still being worked on. But we also used the internet to try and reach as many people as possible. We have millions of views on that child lock video, and we can't even track it because on WhatsApp you can't make out how many views and who it was sent to and how many people actually saw it. But that was a reach we could not have achieved purely through television. We managed to achieve it because we also used the internet. So my message today is pretty straightforward to everyone. We will all get undoubtedly put into boxes at some point where you'll feel like you're being restricted. You'll feel like someone has paper clipped your wings together and you're not able to fully do what you want to do. But the answers are not always outside the box. The answers are sometimes just beyond the box. It's about recognizing what your strengths are and using them to your advantage. So when we sat around in the beginning to launch Mirror Now, and we realized that we're inexperienced, and we're not celebrities and nobody knows our names, we realized that was also an advantage. It means that we're young and that we're hardworking and that we have no baggage. When we realized that we have more women, actually most of the people in my channel are women, more women anchors than male anchors, and that might be, some people actually told me, is a disadvantage because people like to listen to news from men. They don't take news from women so seriously. I realized that maybe it is time for that change. Maybe it is time for a woman to come in and make news less angry. Maybe it is time for a team of women to come in and reprioritize the news and put the things that really matter forward. And the fact that we have that young team meant that we were better at the internet than everybody else. We were better at Twitter, we were better at Instagram, we were better at Facebook. We were able to listen better. We had no baggage over, what should be and how it should be done and why it should be done. We were also able to be more democratic. Every day, and someone asked me among the organizers, they said, can you talk about how you choose your stories every day? And it's actually good fun because we have, so most of the team is in its 20s, and we do 2 phone calls in the morning, and then we sit together over around lunchtime, and we decide what we want our lead stories to be. We actually argue it out, and then we vote. So somebody will say, no, I think this is a bigger story. I'll give you a very recent example. There was a story about, this was last Friday, 3 days ago. There was a story about Padmavati, right? And at the same time, the lake in Bangalore was on fire again. And these visuals were coming in live because our reporter was actually the only reporter in the business who was standing there. And you could see this ridiculous story where there's this massive lake. It's about 3-4 kilometers wide. The fire was in the middle of the lake. So these guys had come with fire trucks. The fire department had come there. The fire had been burning for 10 hours. So whatever was in the water, there was enough fuel in the water to burn for 10 hours. The fire trucks came, and there was nothing they could do because they've never had to put out a fire in the middle of water. They had no way to access that fire. They didn't know what to do. They were standing. And nobody knew what to do. And then the government decided, let's call ONGC and ask them if they can cap this fire, because they were treating it like an oil rig that is on fire in the middle of the water, because nobody else knew how to do this. I mean, imagine how ridiculous it is in this day and age that you have a lake that is burning in the middle, because there's so much pollutant in that lake that nobody has found the solution. And we actually stood around that day and said, what should be our story at 9 o'clock today? And most of the people in the team voted that it should be the fire in the lake. And we realized a lot of times these are tough decisions to make, because maybe it's good for TRPs, maybe it's not good for TRPs. But we realize that we choose stories that matter to us. Because if the lake is on fire, that means that poison has gone into the groundwater, into the borewell water, and it is making everybody sick. And this is a story that should be told over and above everything else that's happening in politics. So we choose based on what we feel for. We choose based on who we are. We turn our strengths and our weaknesses to our advantage. So in a business where there are massive Goliaths who are well connected and who know all the important people, we're a little David of a system, but we use our smarts in our advantage. Remember, always in life when there will be an opportunity where you find yourself as a David, it will seem frustrating, but it is never hopeless. Remember to use your weaknesses as your strengths, as your armor. Be proud of whatever it is you don't have, because it makes you special. So if you're inexperienced, and if you're young, and if you're scrappy and you're good for a fight, remember that that makes you special. It will allow you to put up a completely different product, a completely different fight, a completely different argument. And there is nothing better to break clutter than what makes you special. Thank you.